let me pose a hypothetical question. You have a lot of money. You have all the money you need. You also have a very, very popular and very profitable IP in the form of a sci-fi space war game, and you are releasing a new book with rules for a freshly updated faction with a bunch of new models and the kind of attention that it has not seen for literally years and years. Now, when it comes to the book containing the rules and the background and the painting and the nice army shots for this force, do you A, splurge on some tasty new art given that you also employ many talented artists, or do you B, use the art that you used for the last book? And if the answer is B, why? Now I know what you're thinking. That's a weird hypothetical question. Why would you even bring it up? Well, it's because the Tyranid Codex has been shown off and the bog standard normal edition looks very, very similar to the 9th edition. Which is weird because we're not in 9th, we're in 10th now, and there's been so many changes to the game, so many changes in the way you build an army. There's been a massive update for the Tyranids as a whole. They have had so many new models, things that have just been languishing in the range, untouched for years, now have been replaced with shiny, wonderful, new versions of those older models, and we get a new Codex, one of the earliest ones you could possibly get in the start of a new edition. And what do we have on the front of it? We've got this, which is pretty much exactly what we got on the previous one, and I just don't really understand why they're cheaping out on codexes when it's a brand new edition, and especially for this force, which has had such a massive, comprehensive range update. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't the first time this has happened. In fact, I think Tyranids had this exact same thing happen from 7th to 8th, if my memory serves correctly. Or at least someone else did. It's happened before. We know this. But for some reason, this time it feels slightly different, and I think it is purely because of that massive range refresh that the Tyranids have had. They've got so much new stuff, they've had so many old things replaced and updated, and then we get to the Codex, and someone's put some stripes on the background, and a faction symbol behind a Hive Tyrant that was there on the previous book, and I just don't really understand the mentality of not getting some new art on this. I mean, the special fancy, super fancy, special limited edition version has got some cool different art that's not the same as the old Codex. It's a very different style of book, actually, and I have to admit, I really, really like this. I think it looks really good. And most importantly, it can't be mistaken for this, which is the old Codex, which, funnily enough, they did that themselves. They got this mistaken with the 10th edition one, because what was shown in the article from Sunday before was not what is currently being shown, it was this one. And there's a good reason for that. The reason being, of course, that they look very, very similar. I really can't blame them, to be fair. I mean, if you were doing this at a glance and you had a folder labelled Tyranid Codexes and you grabbed the one that looked like it was for 10th, you could totally grab this one by mistake, because look at them, they are pretty much the same. And that is where I'm having a little bit of an issue. So with the nicest will in the world, it just strikes me as being really kind of cheap. And Games Workshop don't need to be cheap. They are not in a position where being cheap is absolutely necessary for the continued success of their product. And especially in contrast to the fact that this is a range that has had a vast amount of attention. It's had so many new models, so many updated sculpts. They've gone above and beyond in making Tyranids go from a range that had a vast number of stuff that are frankly older than some of the people playing the game to having almost everything new, redesigning stuff that has not been touched since, what, like 2nd, 3rd edition or whatever, and then you get to the Codex, and for some reason the decision has been made to, I don't know, we've already got that art, let's just slap it on there, it's fine. Why? Why do it? They plan this stuff so far in advance that I don't understand how they couldn't get someone to just draw a slightly different picture. I mean, if you want to stick a Hive Tyrant on the front, then stick a Hive Tyrant on the front. But it doesn't have to be the same one. Surely you've got people on staff who are capable of drawing a new Hive Tyrant in the, 2-year development cycle of a new Codex? I actually don't know how long it is. I'm assuming it's long enough for a person to, I don't know, draw a picture? I'm not an artist, alright? Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm being massively reductive on how long it takes to do a bit of art for a Codex cover, but I can't help but feel that if you do get new art for Codex covers, before that Codex comes out, there is precedent for an artist being able to actually, make that art before the Codex comes out. And yet this time round, we don't have that. Instead, we have an image that is so familiar to the previous Codex that they got it wrong in their own article because it's so similar. This is one of those things where it's not even a massive deal, right? It's not a hugely important thing. It's not going to make a huge amount of difference to many people. But it looks so absurdly lazy, and it doesn't need to. And I don't really understand why there is that massive juxtaposition between massive range refresh. We're going to change everything. We're going to bring everything up to date. We are going to make this feel like a reinvigorated, updated, refreshed army. And then when you get the Codex, it's going to look exactly the same as it did last edition. I don't know why the same energy isn't expanded to every facet of an army's refresh, and indeed a whole edition's refresh, because this time round it's not just a case of, oh, it's a new Codex. It's a new Codex for a newly updated army for an entirely new edition. And surely, if at any point new art is called for, that would be the time to do it. It's not even a case of it being bad art. I'm not critiquing the art itself. It's fine. I would suggest it's good enough to put on a Codex. Is it good enough to put on the same Codex 2 editions running? I mean, technically, yes, but do Games Workshop need to do that, or could they try and extend their goodwill towards the faction just that little bit more by having something new and fresh for the new and fresh faction, for the new and fresh edition? I'm kind of rehashing the same things here, but it's mostly because I don't get these decisions. Is it a cost-cutting exercise? Possibly. But why do they need to cut that cost? Is it because at this point codexes are kind of borderline irrelevant because half the rules are just not what they were when it was printed within 6 months of them releasing? Sometimes the rules aren't what they were when they were printed before they even land on the customer's doorstep, which is an entirely different conversation and one we've had many, many times. But for me, it's just like, it's an optics thing, isn't it? It's just a case of, you have all the money in the world, you have so many talented artists, you just didn't bother. And why didn't you bother? We don't know the answer to that question. All we know is that it looks like the Codex is an afterthought when you can't even put fresh things on it. And I don't know that that's what it's supposed to look like, and I would think that it probably isn't. But I am by far not the only person who noticed this and immediately thought, well, that's a bit cheap. I don't know that you want it to feel a bit cheap. The cost of these codexes is pretty damn expensive, right? They are not cheap bits of material. They are not cheap books. They are not cheap ways that you can access the hobby. If you're going to pay for something that's expensive, the very least you could do is make it outwardly feel as though it's worth that. Now, in the defense of Games Workshop, the limited edition one does look like a premium product, whatever that means. But if I was a Tyranid collector, if I had the previous Codex and I looked at the new one, I wouldn't necessarily think that I was getting something that Games Workshop would put a huge amount of time into, because it would look almost exactly the same. And that's not necessarily the best look, you know? Even if the art is good, there's something to be said for things being changed up and things having maximum effort put into them. This doesn't feel like that. And I don't think that's the right way to start out Codex releases for 10th edition. I feel like you should make it very clear that it's something totally different for a totally different stage of the game. That's not what we've got, and it just doesn't feel quite right, you know? Anyway, best guesses in the comments down below. Is it a laziness thing? Is it a budgetary thing? Is it hoping people buy up the old stock because they think the 9th edition is actually the 10th edition? Oh no, I've said it out loud. I immediately don't like it. I immediately don't like it. Is that too cynical? Is that too much? It might be too much. Is it entirely unjustified thinking? No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't do that. No, definitely not. No. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. New art every time? I think it's fair. I think it's reasonable. I think it's not too much to ask. New art every time. I mean, it's not like they don't have artists, is it? They've got plenty. Got loads. They make really good artwork. Use them. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I will see you for the next one.